girl. Let's talk. Ramona Holloway here. This is Radio One's series where we sit down with those girls we've always wanted to talk to and talk about the things we always want to talk about. And today I'm talking to two women who remind me a lot of me in the best possible ways because they're daughters, they're carers, they're single, and they're doing it long distance. First off, let me introduce you to Michelle Boudin. She is a senior reporter with NBC Charlotte. And when you see stories out of Charlotte and People magazine, they were probably written by Michelle. Michelle, good to see you.
I know. It's so good to see you. That's the nicest compliment you could give me, that I remind you of you. So thank you.
Uh, because I see you, I watch your caregiving on social media too. And another woman whose caregiving I get to see up close and personal is Jacque Freeman. Jacque Freeman also works for Radio One Charlotte. And what some people don't know is behind the scenes, don't believe that women don't support women because as I was going from Matt Ramona in the afternoon, some really tough negotiations to become Matt Ramona in the morning, Jacque Freeman already worked for Radio One, and she reached out her hand to me and said, "Hold on, we'll take care of each other." I mean, these are the kind of people who I've had in my caregiving life, and I'm thankful for all of them. But you guys are still walking the walk, both single,
Hey,
both full
Michelle.
both full-time career, and both trying to do it not in the same city. I remember that. Jacque, when I talked to you earlier this week, you were like, "Yeah, hold on, I just with my mom." How do you balance?
I tell you, it's not as hard as you would think because at the end of the day, my mother is the most important person in my life. And because she is the most important person in my life, it doesn't matter if mom forgets to tell me that we have a doctor's appointment in Chapel Hill and it's the next day. It doesn't matter. I'm letting everybody know at the office, I'm not going to be here tomorrow because I've got to travel to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then I have to travel to Chapel Hill to get
Oh
mom to
goodness.
her doctors because sometimes she
Wow.
doesn't always tell me when those appointments are, but I fixed that. So I never have to worry about that again because what I
Oh.
started doing is I downloaded the app from the hospital. And so
Mm.
now I get all of the information in reference to when all of her appointments are. And if I need to change anything, now I know in advance. And
That's
so
good
she's
stuff.
always first, and I
That
have to make it happen.
and over the past couple of months, I saw Michelle make something happen that made me look at her as a hero, but I also gagged a little bit. I
Uh-oh.
gagged.
Why?
And you know what
Which
I'm
thing?
talking about. Your parents live where, Michelle?
My parents are in South Florida, where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. So it's a little bit more than a drive. It's, well, I will say, oh, is that what you're talking about? How I drove down there 3 times
Mhm.
during the
Mhm.
pandemic? Uh,
Yes.
yeah, I don't mind sharing this. I mean, if anyone can benefit from this. So I'm someone who hops on a plane at the drop of a hat. I used to travel the world pre-COVID, and I was very lucky to do so. I do not like sitting in the car for extended periods of time, and I hate driving. But with COVID and my mom's health so precarious, her doctors basically said you have to drive. You can't come in contact with people. It's not safe. So
Mm.
I hit the road 3 times during the pandemic, 10 hours from Charlotte to Fort Lauderdale. And I was told that I was not allowed to stop, as in I couldn't come in contact with anyone in bathrooms. And so there I was researching the very first time, this is the beginning of COVID, how do I drive 10 hours and pee in the car? And I'm a little high maintenance. I'm not that high maintenance, but I never wanted to pee in the car. So the
Mm.
first thing that came up was the astronaut story, the one who wore a diaper. And I was like,
Everybody
oh,
remembers her.
right.
Everybody remembers her.
Because it's so
Please.
horrific.
Ooh, yeah.
So that was not going to work for me. So then another friend was like, "Oh, you'll just pull over, and my boys, they just hop out and they just pee in the bushes." I'm like, former crime reporter, not going to do that either. So then I found this thing. I think I got it's in my garage because I have extras if anyone needs. It's like Jane Doe or something. Basically, I
Mhm.
mean, I can't believe I'm talking about this. It's a cup that you strategically place, and it fits women. And you pee in the car. And it is attached to basically kitty litter so that if you had to keep it in the car, you could. I did not. I basically walked my dog, so she did her thing, and then I would pull around to a private spot, call a friend so they were on the phone so I wasn't in danger, and pee in the car. And so these are the things you do because, like you, my mom means everything to me.
Yeah.
And during COVID, like, you do what you got to do. I drove 10 hours back and forth without stopping 3 times. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it's doable.
Whoa. Oh.
Yeah.
Do you ever look back and say, how did I do that?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, but I would do it again. That's the thing. If I had to,
Yeah.
I'll do it again, you know? Thankfully right now they say it's okay for me to stop and pee in a normal bathroom. So
Yay.
that's
Yay
great.
for
Like, I mean, the
restrooms.
things I took for granted that I'm so excited that when I go home for Thanksgiving, I can actually stop in a bathroom. But you do what you have to do. I'm sure we
You
all, I
do.
mean, I
That's
know
right.
that you guys have stories. I mean, my mom had an infection at one point called C. diff, something I'd never heard about. It's
Mhm.
nasty and it's contagious and it produces nasty stuff. And there I was, everyone thinks I'm so glamorous, cleaning up infectious stuff that was coming out of my mom, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Jackie, your attitude is just it's a light. Are you just a positive person, or was there a point where you were like, "Uh-oh," were you ever scared or anxious or confused about the changing roles?
Absolutely. I will honestly say all of that. But what I will say too is I have an older brother who is just as helpful as I
Mm.
am. He lives a little closer to mom. But what was really frightening for us is we lost our dad in 2010, and my parents had been married for 46 years.
Oh.
And it was that time in 2010 that we started to see my mother's health decline because you know what? She didn't want to exist anymore. The love
Oh,
of her
the
life
love
was no
story.
longer here. And it
Ah.
was then that we started to see things happen and
Mm.
she was forgetting things. I mean, she would leave keys in the door overnight and all of those things
And some of
started
that is
to
just
worry
grief.
me. That's
Some of
right.
that is just
It was.
grief.
It was grief. It was a whole process of it. And she literally made herself sick in
Mm.
that process. And it was that time that I said, okay, I have to go home every single weekend. What I would do initially is I would always say, I'm going to give myself 2 weekends out of the month to kind of do me, and I'm going to give mommy 2 weekends out of the month. Well,
Okay.
that no longer worked. It was every weekend that I would get in the car and drive home to be with her so that I could monitor the things that she was doing
Yeah,
and the things
Jackie,
that she
quick
wasn't
question.
doing.
Jackie,
Yes.
I know you're single. Can I get in your business?
Yes, you can.
Because I have to know what this does to your love life. Or is it, I mean, if every weekend is a mama weekend,
That's right. You
uh
said it.
you're also choosing your mom over your love life?
Yes. Yes. And yes, I have made that choice. Now, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes my mom says to me, no, I want you to do you. No,
Mhm.
I want you to be married because, moms look at their daughters and they look at it that way. But
Mhm.
for me, it was mom, you're first. And so anybody that I would meet and start to date, I would explain to them what was first in my life. They had to understand that. And I didn't have the time and don't have the time to really give them. And I wanted them to make that choice because
Right.
I didn't want to make that choice for anyone. So I have remained single because of that. But I have great friends around me. I have great male friends that will
Do
call
they
and
have
say,
any
listen,
friends our age? Am I veering off into the wrong territory here?
that's the next series. That's not this one. But you need that circle. And so when I want to go out to dinner with someone, or if I want to do a concert with someone, even if I want to travel with someone, I have friends that I can ultimately do that with. And it helps me to be able to be even more loving and more patient and more understanding with my mom.
Yeah. Now, Michelle, you're also single. You are a freelance writer. We mentioned for People Magazine, senior reporter with WCNC. I've seen you everywhere. What happens when it's time for you to just hop on the road and drive 10 hours? I mean, what does that do to your career? Because media is very competitive. It's a hungry animal that has to be fed all of the time.
Well, it's interesting because the timing of my mom's illness really coincided with COVID, where it sort of climaxed to the point where I was having to go home. And in that sense, I was very lucky because in a million years, you could not have told me I'd do TV news from my living room. And suddenly I
Wow,
was doing
yes.
TV news from my parents' living room. And that was never, ever acceptable before. But all of a sudden, people were like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. And so I did something I'd never before done as an adult. I mean, I left for college and I was off. You know, obviously, I'm close to my parents. I see them, but I never lived with them again. So I lived with my parents for about 6 weeks in the heart of COVID, and I worked from there. And it was
Mhm.
pretty remarkable that I had bosses that let me do that, and COVID made that happen. So it's this weird, you know, I hate COVID and everything about it, but
Yeah.
it was this weird to live as an adult under one roof and be able to help care for my mom at a really crucial time. I felt very, very lucky. And Jackie, I have to say, my parents have an amazing love story too. And that's part of what makes I can relax and breathe a little because my dad, they're together 50 years. They celebrated their 50th in August. And my dad is the ultimate caretaker. He hooks my mom up to dialysis every night and takes her
Mm.
off in the morning. And I'm so grateful for that. If we didn't have that, I mean, so it sounds like your parents had a similar love story. And I think that's part of it.
Yes.
You know, it's so
Yes.
special. I'm so, so grateful for that. But there were times where my mom was in and out of the hospital and I was having to like get dinner delivered to my mom in Fort Lauderdale from Charlotte because my dad was tapped out. My sister is not as great at this stuff. And so I'd literally be here and my dad would be like, she hadn't had dinner. It's 8 o'clock. They haven't had dialysis.
Oh,
And I'd be calling the head nurse from Fort Lauderdale. And so that, when you asked me to do this, one of the biggest things that's come from this is that you have to have people advocating for you, even if they're far away.
yeah.
You do.
And when mom first started getting sick, like the things started, she was living in Columbus, and for months and months I got off the air. This was pre 9/11, so you could just run straight through the airport. But I'd get off the air, hop on a plane on Friday night, fly back early Monday morning, and I did it
Wow.
every weekend. And then I finally said, mom, I can't. So either if you want me to help you, either you move here or else you have to go to assisted living there. And
Mm.
begrudgingly, she made the decision to move here. Do either one of you see a mom directed move?
I think, my parents pre-COVID had a very full life in South Florida.
Hmm.
They had just basically both retired. And for now, I mean, they're in virtual lockdown because of my mom's health and COVID. So I do think at some point they'll move to Charlotte. My sister's in Atlanta. I think they'll come here. But not at the moment. The thing though when you said that really comes to mind is I don't know that people understand that how mentally it's physically draining as a caretaker, but how mentally draining it is to go every weekend to care for someone or to go once a month or like you, Jackie, last minute. It's so mentally draining and it requires a real support system and people that know what you're going through.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because there's also this emotional drain overall that
Hmm.
takes a toll across everything, because even when you're not doing something physical for your parents, there is that emotional heavy lifting. You're watching your parents deteriorate. You're seeing them be so vulnerable and oftentimes just so fragile. Those aren't the people who raised you. How do you handle the emotional part of it, Jackie?
Let me go back and answer your last question, Ramona. Would Connie ever move from Fayetteville to Charlotte or wherever Jackie is? That answer is absolutely no. And
Wow.
she has made that perfectly clear. And I've had to adjust to that because we've talked about her moving here with me. So I will say about 4 years ago, mom had to go in for some serious surgery. And at the time, I was living in Jacksonville, Florida. I had taken on a management position with the radio company there, and they discovered cancer. And in the process, I had only been there for 4 months. And
Mm.
the first conversation was, Mom, will you move to Jacksonville? She was adamant, no. So I made the decision to leave Jacksonville and move back closer to Mom,
After 4
because of that.
months?
After 4 months, it
After
did not.
4 months.
After 4 months, I was
Mm.
like, I have to do this. And here's the other thing, because
Mhm.
I am single, my brother is married with a family, and it
Mhm.
doesn't take anything away from what he does and how he helps, but I'm the single one. And I take on that complete responsibility because of that. So, would I love her to do that? And the good thing is that she can still take care of herself, but there's illnesses that occur, and there are things that within her mind that she doesn't necessarily do right all the time now, that we have to keep our eyes on how she's moving, how she's driving, making sure
Mhm.
that she can still really
She's still
drive.
driving?
Yes, yes. And so
Good
Go
we
for you.
monitor,
mama.
but
Yeah.
I monitor this on the app. I monitor all of this on the
Ah.
app so that I can see, so that I can see all of these things, And so, yeah, we laugh about it, but her thing is, there's no way I would live with you, because if I put something down, you're going to pick it up, and that's our running joke with each other. I go to her house and I throw away old papers. That's no good,
Mm,
and
mm,
she's like, this is
yes.
my space. I want my space to be the way it is. And my brother had to have conversation with me about that, because sometimes when we have a lot going on, we can get a little I can get a little pushy with Mom sometimes, and
Mhm.
he's the one to bring me back in and say, just listen. And whatever it is she's comfortable with, let her be comfortable with it, as long as she's not hurting herself. And so that's where my emotional support comes from. Because without that, my emotions are all over the place, because
Mhm.
ultimately I'm thinking, unlike Michelle, this is my last parent. What am I going to do, when Mom is no longer here with
Mm.
me? And
Mm.
so those emotions just take me over all the time. And I'm always like, I have to take care of her the best way that I can,
Mm.
because that's what she did for me. So I have to do the same thing.
I tell you, one of the gifts you talked about, the gift of COVID. One of my gifts of COVID was I was in lockdown with Mom for the last year of her life. And I shared her with other people, and then people started sharing their mother-daughter love stories with me. Mother-daughter love stories are amazing,
Mhm.
are absolutely amazing. Where does your support come from, Michelle?
I have amazing friends. Just
Let's
Jackie,
high
it's
five that.
I mean, honestly, I couldn't do it. I mean, I'm so grateful for this. I have a huge support network across the country, but really primarily in Charlotte, that drop everything for me at the drop of a hat. And you have to do that as a single woman. I will say
Yes.
this. I recently started seeing someone, still very new, but it was interesting because, yeah, we'll
I
see.
wasn't gonna say I wasn't gonna say anything I didn't think it was okay to talk about.
The
I'm
only
glad
reason
I
I
didn't
bring
bring it
it
up.
up is because I realized he was worth seeing where it was going to go, because for our third date, he doesn't live in town, of course. God, God forbid I should find something easy in my life these days. I was going to go visit him, and instead, or he was going to come to visit me, and he said, my mom took a turn for the worse at this point. This is a couple of months ago. He said, well, I'll drive you down there. And it was like our third date. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, I'll drive. I'm like, it's 10 hours. You haven't met my parent. What? He's like,
Jackie,
yeah, well, if you need to be
That's
with
what you
your mom.
want.
I just
So
heard
I'm trying.
Jesus say, Ramona, there's hope.
Yeah, there's hope
I
for
just
us.
heard the voice of
There's hope.
Jesus say,
Yeah, so I don't want to
Ramona,
switch gears because
there
that's a
is
whole other
hope.
show, like you said. But that was, I mean, so you talk about a support system, and I have friends in my life that are the same way. They would drop everything and get, because anyone who knows me knows I hate being in the car. So I've had people say, I'll ride with you, whatever it is you need to do. And I've had people say, do you need me to go on a shoot for you because you can't make it? Or, because I do. I mean, I run a company and I do freelance writing and I work for a TV station. And a lot of that, all of a sudden, when, mom is first, just like you said, Jackie.
Yeah.
And so I'm so thankful for so many people in my life.
And I'm thankful for both of you.
And
I
we're
am
thankful for
so
you.
thankful. I'm thankful for my sister circle here in Charlotte, the people who have reached out and carried me along during this process, and they're still doing it. Those are the people we're talking to. The Hey Girl series, you find it on Facebook. Hey Girl, Let's Talk from Radio 1 Charlotte. Michelle, thank you. Jackie, I'll see you at the teams meeting tomorrow.
Oh, I'm jealous.
And
Yes.
you can see all the other ladies of Radio 1 Charlotte right here with Hey Girl, Let's Talk.